Alrighty then. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Speech Bubbles, a webcomic podcast by people who do webcomics for people who like webcomics, read webcomics, want to do webcomics, anything about webcomics. If you want to, this is a podcast for all your webcomic needs. My name is Brent, and I write and draw the webcomic Paradise.
You almost did that in one breath.
I almost said Backlash!
You almost said Backlash!
I don't know why!
Oh, okay. I see how it is, buddy. I'm Amber. I do the webcomic Backlash.
And I'm Jeff. I don't do the webcomic Backlash, but however, I do the comic Firearm with a Y.
I think it's because I get email notifications on my phone, and I just got your Patreon update. And it's got Backlash in big old fucking letters. And it's on the brain. Man, verbal gaffes aside, today's episode is about a thing, the kind of the behind the scenes work of making a comic. It's about scripts and writing process. And
Yay.
I think a lot of people, when they start out and they're like, I'm gonna draw a comic or I'm gonna draw a webcomic, they think draw. They think like, I have to learn how to draw and I have to learn how to draw the comics. And it's like, yes, you do, because it's a visual medium. But like writing and like scripting, well, maybe not scripting specifically, but like you're also writing a story. Mm-hmm. It's as much a literary medium as it is a verbal medium. I know a lot of times when we had to like write papers in school and stuff, I've written my fair share on like papers that were like, comics are literature also. Like that was a topic I like went back to the well a lot on, because it's like I got to write about comics and it sounded like an educational topic. But yeah, what are your guys' kind of like personal relationships with scripting and the writing process?
I like scripting a lot.
Let me ask...
But I wouldn't show my scripts to any professional in the field.
Let me ask you, did you guys start with scripts when you started your comics? Were you like, I'm starting my webcomic, first I gotta do the script?
Not with the original run. Not with the very first one.
Not in Proto Backlash.
No. Back in OG Backlash was just draw the pages. And so it was like, I didn't know where I like knew where I was going in my head, but I didn't have a script I was drawing off of. And I think you can tell. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of like rambles and meanders around until it gets to the point. And now my pages are pretty to the point. We're going somewhere now. So
I don't know, I guess kinda not. Like, here's the thing, when I first started writing Firearm, I didn't have like an actual structured like script. I had like, I kind of wrote it as if I was like writing a novel with like very brief descriptions, because I knew I was going to draw it anyway. Mm-hmm. But like, I would just like I would just write paragraphs on paragraphs of things. It was a good way of getting like my thoughts down, but not a good way for like writing, like drawing from it, I guess. So I didn't switch over to scripts until like, I think I know the exact number because that's the start of my current script, page 10 of this current chapter, because I had to like redo all my pages, so I had to like rewrite all my scripts and everything.
Mm-hmm. Did you, when you say you wrote paragraphs and paragraphs, like did you write like dialogue, or was it just like describing what was it consisting of?
Like, would you write like a conversation, or would you write like, Stranger and Ravi have a conversation about bandits?
Yeah.
You know what? It would go back and forth. If it felt like it was like a conversation that wasn't like too poignant or didn't need to be said in a certain way and I could work it out at the time, then I would just kind of say like, oh, they have a conversation about this topic.
If you didn't have like a plot point that like needed to be brought up, it just had to be like about it.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's not the best way of going about it.
See, my like all of my scripts are very much just, it's just dialogue. It looks like it looks like a
like
the
a
way
movie
I do
script?
it looks like a movie or like a stage play. Like,
yeah.
And I leave the like action really vague. Like, I'll just write a little note like, he punches them there, or like they start running, or there's an action sequence here. And then, because like that's something that I could describe it in the script, but I leave it up to like my own like visual storytelling to like work that out when I get there, because that's a visual thing that doesn't need like, I don't need to write down the dialogue for, you know.
And that's kind of a perk of like being both the writer and the artist of your own comic, is that like you can write a script and be pretty bare bones and be like, I know what I meant. Like if you're a writer,
know what I mean.
Yeah, if you're a writer working for a different, like I've had this conversation with other people before, like if you're like a writer who's working for a different artist, like you might want to like plan out panels and stuff, or page layouts even. But I mean, if you're like the artist, like my scripts are pretty much just like scene, setting, and then dialogue, and then maybe like action or expressions. It'll be like, she looks forlorn here, or fucking something crazy gestures or something like that, but nothing too like explicit outside of dialogue, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't even start scripting until about a year in. Yeah, I did like the first 3 chapters, kind of total improv. Chapter 4 was like a mix of thumbnails and script, but it wasn't like total either way. It would be like 5 pages that I did with thumbnails, and then like a handful of like conversation dialogue in like a Google Doc somewhere. And chapter 5 was the first chapter I did where it was like I thumbnailed it and scripted it the whole way through.
I kind of go for the more minimal scripting now too. I find it's easier to kind of come up with that stuff on the spot. You know?
I definitely like I love writing dialogue. I got my like start with, I used to do a lot of like writing for fun. I've written a lot of fanfics actually. And like I just really like writing people talking to each other, and I think that probably shows in my comic because there's a lot of talking, but I like quips and like back and forth, and you know, and so I like spend a lot of time getting the dialogue down just right, and like with the right kind of nuances and the right kind of, you know, like I say it in a very particular way. And that's what I spend my time on with the script, and then like everything else is just, and then that happens. draw that.
Yeah, that's a preferable way for me to introduce characters, as opposed to showing a character on their own doing a thing. I prefer to like introduce characters in like sets of 2 or 3 so they can immediately bounce off each other in a conversation.
And you can like get a feel for them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever have the problem of where like you're trying to like write dialogue and you really like the dialogue, but it doesn't quite really fit on your page or in your bubbles?
No, because I write the dialogue first on my pages when I'm drawing them, so that there's always room for the bubbles. That's my number 1 rule.
Yeah, I try, like, as I've gone on, I try and, like, not put too much on one page. Also, that's, like a good way, but I also, like, I told you guys this last week after we recorded the last episode. I do the layouts in Sci. I save it as a PNG. I put the PNG in MS Paint. I do the text boxes in MS Paint, so I know what size my speech bubbles need to be, and then I finish the page back in Sci, draw the speech bubbles over the sketch layer and stuff, put it back in MS Paint, put the text over the speech bubbles. Because
what you got.
I'm a whatever works garbage
MS
person.
Paint.
And I have Clip Studio Paint, but I'm too set in this type of routine now. But also, yeah, as I've you know, been making Paradise and stuff, I do like become a lot more conscious of like how much I'm putting on the page. Like I'm probably just now getting more comfortable with lettering, and like placement of word bubbles and stuff. So like you don't want paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff because that's difficult to read and it just doesn't look very good. So less is usually more in that case. I think we might have said as much in another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, if you're having trouble, like, if you have, like, dialogue and you're like, this isn't fitting in this page, my number one advice is write your dialogue on the page before you draw it. Like, but, like, I do my thumbnails and my scripts, and then the first thing I do is I type out all of the text, how it should be, and that's, like, there, so I can see it and see where it's going to be, and then I sketch and go over it, like, and then I do the sketching and the line art and the speech bubbles are the first thing I do, so that I know that they'll look okay.
And not overlap anything important
and not
you
cover,
might draw.
Yeah, not cover up anything important or, like, feel cluttered.
I'm still getting the habit of that, so I run into the problem a lot.
Well, and then there's always, like, I mean, I know how, like, kind of tantalizing being like, I only want to do a 20-page chapter can feel, but, like, sometimes the solution is just to, like,
let it be a little longer.
Yeah, just add another page onto that scene.
Breathe.
We're already kind of taking, like, an answery tone. You guys want to jump into questions?
Sure thing.
They're all nice and numbered. I'm going to start with the first one. From @Mordsec. Where do you start? ? I have a lot of trouble starting stories and dialogue. Also, how would you deal with characters that are nonverbal or characters that are inanimate objects? Where do you draw the line between it could be better and that's it, I probably shouldn't keep editing this for the nth time? So
good questions here.
A
lot of good questions here. Where do you start?
I never start at the beginning. I always start with a random like I'm juggling like another fucking new story concept right now in my head. But the first scenes I have some scenes planned out. The first scenes I have aren't anywhere near the beginning. What they are is like characters meeting, characters interacting, characters like wanting to leverage things against the other characters. I might not know what those plot points are, but I know I want to have a scene where like X character is like blackmailing other character for what have you. So like usually the first parts of any story I start are like characters meeting and those sort of moments.
When I'm first developing a story, that's usually the same thing as like when you like start getting like ideas for like plots and points and like where things are going to build to, and like once you have like scenes, just kind of like back up and be like, okay, do I need to explain how they got to this point? And like go back far enough that like where you're like, okay, we can start here. And I find also if you're having trouble like just sitting down and like starting like writing, just like pull up a Word document, a Google Doc, whatever you want to use to write with, and just start writing everything that comes to your mind.
Yep. Like
whether or not you think it's going to be good or not. Like don't sit down and try to like write the perfect script the first time. Like just sit down and like spit ideas out on a Google Doc so you have all of it down, and then you can organize it and build on ideas. And
yeah, as soon as you feel that scene and you have some specific dialogue you want to get down, like you don't have to sit down and write for hours. You can just pop open a Google Doc, quickly type in the lines of dialogue you want to get, and just save it. That could be like 15 minutes out of your day.
I do that like all the time. Every time I get an idea, I have like a very specific like Google Docs for each of my stories that are just called scene ideas, and I just toss in whatever scenes I can think of when I get them, and then I can just organize them later.
Because like don't judge your ideas while you're getting them. Like just write everything down, because you don't know what could like if it seems like a dumb idea to you now, like you could look at it later and be like, ooh, this actually gives me an idea, like a really cool idea for something else. Like just nothing's a bad idea. Just especially when you're trying to get started, like just write it down. Just write down everything.
And sometimes in the like vein of dialogue, sometimes it's a little bit of like actually coming up with stuff can be a little bit of improv, or like essentially self roleplay as like the characters in the situation. Like you might not know it's like I want X character to say that, but like more like this character needs to say this. How would this character react to that? and kind of build on that. I'm working on a script for a side project right now, and like I knew who the characters were, I knew how they'd act, and what I did for the introduction scene, because I needed to introduce like the 10 main characters of the story or whatever, I just pretty much threw them at each other and like improv typed conversations for like an hour or something, and like you get more attached to characters that way, and sometimes characters surprise you with like how they like how your brain would go, this character would react to this character like this. It's real fun.
So just have fun with it.
Improv a little bit.
Don't worry about it. You can judge yourself and your work after you've done writing it all, and then get the crap out of it.
Yeah.
How about characters that are nonverbal? How would you guys handle that?
I have a character that is nonverbal.
She
only got to be in Muse. She only got to be in one scene so far, so we haven't quite gotten to like interact with her very much, but she will come back. I think with like nonverbal characters, it kind of depends on like why they're nonverbal. Like, do you want to be having them like using like sign language or something? Because like you could depict that's a visual way of communication. You could also just have I feel like it's like the implied like gesturing if they're trying to communicate. If they just don't communicate at all, that's like, it's just easy. A lot
of like writing nonverbal characters is gonna be more like visual
the gesture
stuff. It's gonna be like body language and
their character acting and how they like their expressions and how they move and pose themselves. Yep.
Also, lighting. Paying attention to mood and lighting can also help evoke certain emotions without even having to gesture or make facial expressions.
Yeah, colors can really help get the mood across.
So you like on the script page, your nonverbal characters are maybe gonna be more like X looks disappointed, or like X is gesturing wildly with their hands. But like they're gonna be ones you're gonna like probably be you're gonna have to pay attention more to them on the page, I guess.
Yeah, during the actual like drawing process than the scripting process.
How about inanimate objects? That's an interesting one.
I'd say probably the same. I saw this question. I tried to think of an example like all morning, and the best I could come up with was like the footstool from Beauty and the Beast that acts like a dog.
Oh yeah.
It's like that's it's kind of like the same deal. It's like that character doesn't have any lines, but it acts like a dog, so you can kind of infer what its role in the story is.
Does this mean like an object that can't move?
I'm assuming. Well,
or is it like or is it something like the like cursed servants from Beauty and the Beast, where they're all like inanimate objects, but they are also characters? Like,
they all have like faces and they look like people, so you just write them like normal characters.
Yeah, but like if they're just an inanimate object that like maybe talks, I don't know. That would you'd probably kind of need to rely on like how the other characters react to that character.
And visual design is going to say a lot about that, like whether or not it's like it's a lamp, or like this is a lamp that's evokes a specific kind of vibe. Like, is it a sinister looking lamp? Is it a comedic looking lamp?
Glow red. Things like that.
Yeah, I think that's like the nonverbal characters. That's just going to rely more on what you put on the page as opposed to what you put in the script, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can make little notes in the script on like what you're trying to evoke with that feeling, and then come back to it when you're on the page.
Dramatic zoom in on the sinister lamp.
And then this one, where do you draw the line between it could be better and that's it? I probably shouldn't keep editing this for the nth time. Where do you guys draw the line with your thing? Because I'm really impatient.
Yeah, it depends on it depends on how long it bugs me. If it bugs me for like a little bit, but like later that day I'm like, I could probably live with this. Like, I don't. But I mean, there's been stuff where like I thought about it for like maybe 2 or 3 days afterwards, and like sent pages to friends that I trusted and were like, how should I get the dialogue across here? I don't think it's working as is, and changed it for the better. But that's really gonna be like a confidence slash like knowing yourself and how you work deal. I think, right?
A lot of webcomics, not just with like writing down scripts and stuff, like just the whole process in general, because you are a self-driven, self-motivated person. You're not on a salary, you're not on a work day. It's all up to you. So it's always comes down to like, you just have to know you have to like feel that out with yourself, when like what your current, like what you can currently live with, and you'll just get better as you go. I like, when I'm doing my scripts, I'll like do like a really vague like outline, like we're gonna start here, we're gonna end here, and then I just fill in the middle, and then I'll read it over, I'll leave, I'll come back, I'll read it over again, and then I'll do edits, and then I usually only go through like maybe 2 passes, and then I'm done. Like, because I don't have time to just, it's never going to be perfect, especially because, you know, baby's first webcomic, there's going to be things that are always going to be able to be better, but you just kind of have to pick up and learn as you go.
And if you just keep changing around shit, if you just keep changing shit around, like, the longer you're putzing around in the scripting stages, the longer it takes to get to your comic. I think worst case scenario, if it's really, really bugging you, like, pass it off to some friends you trust who have good opinions on stuff, and be like, does this make sense?
Yeah, and also sometimes you might be kind of stuck up in your own head. Like that happens a lot. Like, you're thinking, oh, this doesn't make any sense, oh, this is bad, but like, it's just because you haven't had an outside opinion, and it might be perfect how it is.
Yeah, you could show it to a pal and be like, they might be like, I don't know what you're worrying about. Like, this is fine. this is a good thing. I want to read this thing.
Don't be afraid to share your stuff. I don't think I've ever sent a script to a friend, though. Personally. I don't think I've ever sent a script.
Not a script. I've sent pages to a friend before where I'm like, I want to accomplish this with the dialogue, but I feel like it's coming across like stagnant or weird. Is there a better way I could phrase this? I mean, it's the same like we've talked about having a confidant. As like a person, yeah.
Definitely just walk away, come back, talk to friends. Yeah.
Don't just sit there and like stew in your own mind about it.
That's the worst thing you can do.
Okay, this next question at MetaSpaceCutie asks, how do you write the scripts for your own webcomics? Is there a specific way that works best? And this is I think scripting for webcomics, because you are the writer and the artist, it's whatever works best for you.
Yep.
And what works best for you might not necessarily be what works best for like other people. And like I think it's like a very specific like personal process for everybody.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast. We all write scripts pretty like bare bones, mostly dialogue, maybe some setting notes and stuff. And if you're the artist and you know what you mean, you don't like have to separate it by page or whatever, like that's gonna work best for you. And this is purely for like webcomics. If you're like going for like a comic job at a publisher or something and you want to be a writer, that, you know, I would look into like scripts that they use and like how they work. But if like works best is really just means works best for you.
And it doesn't, there is no like best tried and true way with this. Like, it's personal. You just have to try it and like figure out what works for you.
Maybe get friendly with Google Docs.
Yeah, I think that's all I can be said from that.
Yeah, simple.
All right, from at unkindestnewt32, how do you go about tying in scenes you already have planned in your head? You have the scenes, but you just don't know how to tie them together. I actually struggled with this one a bit early on because I didn't know what the story of Firearm was going to be. I just knew what I wanted. And I had like a crap ton of scene ideas that I just wrote down, just like I said before, in my like little scene doc, and they're just a bunch of random stuff. Well, a good thing to have is definitely an outline.
I was just
And
gonna say outline.
yeah, yeah. Just kind of like work out your beginning and your end, and then kind of figure out, I guess, if you want to have all those scenes in it, figure out where they're going to go in there. How is it going to progress? And
I think a good thing is just ask yourself, like, okay, how? Like, if you're looking at them and you have them all laid out in front of you in order, if you can put them in order that you'd like them to happen, like, that'd be great too.
You're already halfway there.
You're already halfway there. You just have to figure out those in between things, right? So just like be like, okay, so how do they go from point A to point B? Like, what needs to happen to incite this next thing, that this next scene I want to get to? And don't feel like you have to like meander around. Like if there isn't really a whole lot to like do in between, like you can just go from scene to scene.
Yeah, I do like a lot of like regressive, like working backwards. Like it's in character design. Like if I design a character that has a scar of some sort, part of me is gonna like wonder. It's like, all right, how did they get that scar? Yeah, I do the same thing with my scripts. Like I said before, like I have this scene. This is a scene I want to do. Like, so you work backwards. All right, how did the character get here? What is the character here for? Like, why do they need to be here talking to this person? And then otherwise it's just kind of like suffering, because I mean sometimes you sit around with a whole bunch of scenes and you're like just waiting a little bit to like figure it out, because you don't want to feel like you're banging your head against the wall trying to solve a math puzzle or something. But you can feel like sometimes I definitely have stories that like came to me immediately, and I have stories that it's like figuring out a fucking word problem, being like, how do we get from point A to point B? Where does point C come in? Point D's character arc makes no sense. That needs to be fixed.
I think another good thing to keep in mind also is sometimes scenes might just not fit, and you might have to cut them, and that hurts, and that's hard. But you kind of have to like judge. You have to be the judge of like, okay, but is this like a really necessary scene? Or is it just like something that I think would be fun?
That I just want to put. And I think there's especially with like everybody's like quote unquote like your big 10-year dream project is like you have a tendency to like want to have everything in it because it's probably your first idea and it's probably been sitting in your brain for at least like 6 months to years. So you probably have like a lot that you want to put in it, and sometimes it doesn't. You don't need all that. Sometimes you gotta cut stuff out.
You gotta let those babies go. Sometimes they're just gonna be more detrimental than it's worth.
Just keep it fond. Keep fond memories of it. Look back at it when you're done and be like, yeah, that would have been a mess.
Maybe find ways to repurpose the interactions like thematically with other characters and other stories.
Yeah. I do that all the time.
All right. From @DeltaNova_, do you worry about your script having inconsistent tone/theme/characterization? Do you think consistency of tone, themes, and characters is important?
Depends on the story. If you're going real hard and heavy on those, on like a certain tone or a certain theme, then probably. My comic's not very consistent.
Yeah.
My comic's pretty consistently goofy. It's consistently cryptic. But like, but that's purely just because I'm laying plot threads left and right willy-nilly.
You're also building like a whole world that's not it's not like basically the modern American world, but different, which is like what I'm doing. Is like, so I can get away with like not having to write a lot of like world building exposition, because it's like these characters are gonna have cars and smartphones, and you know that because you have cars and smartphones. You're building like a whole fucking like solar system essentially. So you've got a lot more groundwork to lay. But about like consistency, it depends. If you do a tone shift and it doesn't make sense to you, ask yourself why it doesn't make sense. I think there's a difference between like my comic has jokes and also very sad character death, and like those sort of things like aren't like necessarily incongruous. It's just it's like a case by case thing. You have to judge whether or not like is this tone quote unquote inconsistent, or am I just worried about like maybe like people who came for jokes not being up for drama.
I'm dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with that right now.
I think that this can kind of go back to what we were talking about before with pacing, in that if you pace between those two different tonal shifts, I think then it'll be maybe fine. You just have to make sure that it's not going to be like a sudden shift. Unless you want that shock moment, then you probably should make sure that it's going to be written pretty well. But I think you just need to kind of pace it out if you want to really change tones and keep that kind of mood consistent.
And honestly, I think that I don't think that like tone shift and like themes shifting, like I don't think the feel of your comic shifting should be something to be afraid of. Because honestly, like tone shifts like are what make it interesting. I mean, if you had just one long note the whole time, it might get kind of boring. It might get kind of stale. Like, okay, the same old. Like switching it up and having dramatic things happen and like have your characters deal with drama. Like that's part of the like whole conflict thing. Like,
yeah, God forbid I go back to like the Full Metal Alchemist. Well, but that's it's a perfect example, and it's an example a lot of people know is like how many episodes in is the fucking Shao Tucker episode, and how close are the Shao Tucker moments to like fucking Ed shouting about don't call me fucking short, like that's
I don't want to drink milk.
Yeah, it's a perfect example, and it's one a lot of people know, and like you can have like tones that are different from each other without them being disharmonious, because those both of those kind of moments feel right for FMA, and it's whether or not I think it bothers you, and if it's actually bothering you, or you're just worried how it'll be perceived, is two totally different questions.
And it's also, I don't know, with like Full Metal Alchemist, the reason why like all of those tone shifts and like the like different scenes that are vastly different from each other all feel like, okay, yeah, this isn't out of place. It's because like the characters are very three-dimensional, and they're like very quickly shown to like have a very wide range of emotions and like how they deal with trauma and stuff. Like you have like the second episode is like when they freaking do the thing, like the flashback episode. And you're like, that's messed up. These are little boys. Ooh, that's horrible. And then like you show them like, trucking on and like trying their best. And so it's like, it's just like you see the three-dimensionality of their character and how they're able to like exist in all tones and all situations. So I think just like you can make any tone shift work and any like theme shift work. It's just gotta keep in mind like how your characters are going to react to that and have them react in a believable way.
Yeah, consistency of like characters is a harder thing to nail down, because there is a difference between like I don't feel like that character would do that given the information we know, and like the character is capable of more than one. It depends on like how archetypal you're gonna go. And I don't know, there's a difference between like, I don't know, that's something I worry about a lot too, because I have characters who like definitely change throughout the course of the story, but also change as we know them, because they're characters who act differently in different situations. And in one situation might be like a very uptight and in control, but as soon as they're kind of like their footing is lost, they become like a total mess. And like I don't think that's inconsistent characterization, but like maybe having a character who's like, I'll never do blank, and then having them act like that like right afterwards without giving a reason why there'd be that's inconsistent characterization. That's gonna bug your audience and your readers, I think.
Here's the thing I think you should probably maybe ask yourself. If you think that your readers, or just yourself while you're reading through it, are going to be confused between the inconsistencies, then maybe you should change something about it. So just ask yourself that. Is this going to be confusing if I just switch it up here, or is it going to be fine?
And again, don't be afraid to ask like friends and people for feedback if you're not sure.
Because also, like, as much as like things might be goofy just because you're all up in your own head, things might also like only make sense to you because you're all up in your own head. And as soon as you ask someone about it, it might be like, oh, that was gibberish. I should clean this up a little bit, figure it out better.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Next question from @McSpoofy. What are some things you do in order to avoid over-scripting a scene where the dialogue overshadows the art and clutters the page? Oh, we kind of talked about that before.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, if you're writing your scripts like page 1, page 2, page 3, and then you thumbnail it out and you have like pages where nobody says anything and pages where like there's way too much dialogue, maybe consider just writing out the dialogue and then like as you're thumbing it out, figure out how much needs to be on the page.
That's what I do.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
I write all the dialogue first and then I do the thumbnails. And I physically, I don't know, my scripting and thumbing process is weird. It's just, I take an 8.5 by 11 piece of printer paper and I draw the pages at full size. I don't do tiny thumbs. I can't do it. And I physically, with a pencil in my own hand, I write down the dialogue on the page. Like it's physically there. And so I can see how big it is and how much needs, like what needs to go where. And I kind of feel it out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
in my thumbnails, I don't write the whole dialogue because I do thumbnails on kind of like 8x5, maybe a little 8x5 sketchbook. But what I do is I put the speech bubbles where I feel like they will probably be placed best, and obviously I don't have enough room to write out the whole thing. But like it could be like weeks or months before I like look at those thumbnails to do those pages. So what I do is like, to know what speech bubbles correspond with what lines of dialogue, I'll write like the most prominent word in that dialogue and put it in the speech bubble. So like I'll have, I mean, my thumbnails look goofy because it'll be like jail, home, you, like shit like
that to a friend
shit like that, yeah. But like I look at the
on?
thumbnail and then I open up my script and it'll be like I'll know this panel corresponds with this line of dialogue. And that's my little trick.
And that works for you.
Prima strategy guide.
I do something kind of similar, except since I already kind of know what's going to be on which page, I kind of like work out. I put like little numbers. Like I number each of my little dialogues. And little blurbs, and I'm gonna have on the page. And then when I make my little tiny thumbs, because I do work tiny, I like take a different color and I kind of put out where the speech bubble is going to be, and then I just put the little number in there, and that kind of helps me keep track of at least also not only chronologically how it's going to flow, but also what's going to be in each bubble.
I envy you guys that can work with tiny thumbnails. I envy you. I feel so like unprofessional because I just can't do it. It just doesn't work for me. I have to do them full size.
Here's the thing, I used to do them full size, but then I would feel like, since I'm just like making like this like really scribbly looking thing, I'm like, man, I should just like completely sketch this out. And then sometimes since I do that, it's, if I want to change up the flow or anything, then I'm like, oh, but now I have to like redo this entire thing.
That's why my sketches and thumbnails, they're just like floating eyeballs and like circles for heads. Like you can't tell what's going on in my thumbnails.
My characters all have like a specific thumbnail language. Like Otto is basically like an egg and some lines, and Pam is like usually like a circle and then like a sharp line wherever the nose is supposed to go. And I don't know. I like just again, like we're talking about like how scripting is personal. I like personally having things for a specific purpose. So I like having like a little 8x5 sketchbook that has all of like the thumbnails for the chapter in it or whatever, and like going out and getting another sketchbook for another thumbnail. I have probably about 2 of them that are like, one is full and one is like about half full now of thumbnails at this point. And I like having that specific purpose. I like when I'm working on the layouts inside, I have my little sketchbook propped up like beside the computer. That's yeah, makes me feel like I have my shit together. The illusion of control.
The illusion of control in the webcomic world.
God, and I was like, thumbnails are a whole nother discussion, but like, this most recent scene is one I haven't thumbnailed. I was just like, oh, I should probably put this in because I think this is important for this character's perspective, and I'm just improvising it, and like, I can feel it. I don't know how it looks to like readers, but I can feel when I'm like, this would have been better if I were playing this. And
I think it's looking pretty good though.
I
wouldn't have
appreciate
guessed.
it.
I
I'm not fishing, but I appreciate it. But scripting is just another level of that. I feel safer going into layouts when I have thumbnails. I feel safer going to thumbnails when I have a script for it. It's like having like you have a sketch layer and then you have a line work layer. It's just that, but for your story. Which is probably like a bit much for this. I feel like we maybe went off on a
think we
tangent.
kind of derailed a little bit. Anyway,
that's fine.
So pulling it back then, pulling back. Question from @TurdGollum. How often do you find yourselves changing to the overall script based on better ideas popping up as you go? Does this create big problems? Yes, it does.
Yeah, it can. And this is an interesting kind of. It depends on like what you're changing, because a lot of times I will change dialogue from the script to the page because sometimes things just work better or like flow better or something. And like we said before, if I'm not trying to get a specific line out or a specific plot point across, like dialogue can be improved a little bit. But if you're changing like events or things that happen, or like like this character should show up 2 chapters ahead instead of like like 2 chapters in the future, that's gonna send little ripples all across your story.
Yeah, that changes like all the setup you've already been doing. It changes what you have to like be focusing on, and like okay, like I know like with my whole story, I know how it ends. Like I've known how Backlash ends for years and years. But like I only just recently in the last few months figured out like the the big like Dark Night of the Soul like the
Climactic.
worst part. The
all
climactic.
hope is lost.
Yeah, like that part. I only just really recently, and I was like, freaking, I have to do so much more setup now, and I'm so like, it just made my story infinitely longer, and I'm like, frick me, frick.
Oh yeah, no, I've had that kind of and you guys kind of know this. I have a character who originally didn't show up until maybe like chapter 12 or 13 or something ridiculous, and instead I took his character and another character that he's partnered with and kind of replaced some like one-off characters who are just going to show up and never do anything again, and so they're going to be showing up really soon. But what that's caused me to do is like mental math. Okay, it's like, so if this character is here, why is this character here? What is this character being here change about the greater implications of their role in the story? Like, how is this going to change like the scenes and the conflict? And like we've talked about on the antagonist and protagonist episodes, I think probably like having a character around and introduced in little chunks can make your readers feel like strongly about them, as opposed to like having a character introduced at the halfway mark and having less time to like be around and have like small jump starts of development. But like changing an event like that has caused me for maybe the past like 2 weeks or so kind of like really refine the next like 2 or 3 chapters, because it does change things significantly. And it's like, just you got to do your little mental backflips and figure out why and how.
How often do you find this happening? Like, how often do you guys do that? Like, find yourself changing things in your story?
To be perfectly honest, a little too consistently at the moment.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I mean, I talked about it before, but I've been trying to downsize the story a bit, so then it's
so you
not
don't
taking me like
fucking live your whole life doing it.
I mean, if it was my only story, sure.
You don't want to be like Mira doing Berserk for his whole fucking life.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had a lot of scene changing, a lot of rippling, a lot of it's caused a lot of problems. It's starting to smooth out now as I'm like it's almost back into the settled position where I don't have to worry about the awakening the beast once more, but it does cause problems. I can definitely confirm that. And I think that's kind of telling. If that you don't have that quite worked out just yet, then maybe you aren't quite ready to work on your story. You should definitely work out your script beforehand.
Well, and I don't think you have to have it 100% figured out before you start, though, because like honestly, if I'm speaking super honestly, looking at my own like script or backlash, I have like the specifics nailed down for maybe like 60% of the story.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. If maybe more than like 50 or 60% is totally nebulous to you, maybe like sit on a little longer. But I think probably about like a 60%. Yeah, I think over half is a good. And that doesn't necessarily like, mean in order, but like half of the whole skeleton of the story.
Yeah, because like I'm definitely leaving stuff like it's like as I progress through the story, like the next couple chapters like reveal themselves to me. It's just really stupid to say that, but like that's what happens. Like it's like once like I have a vague idea of what's gonna happen, and then once I get to a certain point, it's like this is going to happen next. Oh, that makes a lot. Okay, and it's like it just kind of like I discover. I'm very much that kind of writer where I discover as I'm going. Like I know where I'm building to, but like the specifics don't reveal themselves until I get closer.
Or like my outline will be like, for this chapter, I know I need to have this scene and this scene play out, and that's it. But I have like. As ostensibly probably my chapters go about 40 to 50 pages, so I've got like ostensibly about 50 pages of real estate. What else can I put in there? And like this next chapter I've been writing has like my original outline. It's like there were only two things I really needed to get across, and since writing into that chapter, I have like maybe 5 major scenes total, including those original 2 scenes that now have added more to that chunk of the story, and I'm really happy about it. I don't know if I change things super often. Paradise has been like, I mean, Paradise was not anything set in stone until like 6 months into it, but the overall kind of like major arcs have been like set since then. Most of the things that change are me like being like, oh, so this character can be here and be around for this and sort of deal. And then I change dialogue pretty regularly. Like, my scripts don't look exactly 100% like what the pages look like. Yeah. But I don't change a lot of like really big events. Yeah.
I mean, same. Like the big things that change for me consistently are like it's just me like figuring out where things are going. Like them finally like settling in their places. That's mostly like what changes, I guess.
The puzzle revealing itself to you.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Question number next one from.
This is our last question, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. And then we have some opinions because we also asked you guys for some opinions, and we've been going about 50 minutes. From @Alice's Brainpad. Love the podcast. Thank you very much. First time asking a question. I'm an artist who wings what happens between planned plot points. I've tried writing scripts, but I always end up having better ideas when I start drawing the page, or I want to change what happens in a scene completely. My question is, do you think it's okay to do a whole webcomic like this if it works for people who find finalizing a whole script hard?
If it works for you, if you're able to keep all of your like if you're able to keep everything straight and like you don't need to write it down and you can just trust yourself to not forget important things or like leave plot holes, like sure, if that's what works best for you, then yeah.
And if you're not a writer working with a separate artist, like if you don't need a script, then fucking forge ahead. If you were working with an artist and you were like, okay, here's like a vague like list of bullet points that need to happen, that artist might be like, I hate this and I don't want to do this. But if you're in a unique position where you're both artist and writer, so if you don't feel like you really need a script and you feel like it'll be stronger if you tell a story. Now, I mean, here's the thing I might do though. find your confidant instead of sending them your script or sending them your page. Like, call them up if if they're an online friend. Maybe hit them up on like Discord or God forbid Skype, and tell them your story. Tell them what happens in it.
Verbally tell them.
Verbally tell them. You don't have to go so hard as to be like dialogue, but you could be like, and then the character goes here, and this happens, And if it makes sense, and you got that, and you don't need to have a script, then yeah, fucking do it.
There's no rules here.
Yeah,
No
find
rules.
what works for you.
Just right.
I just forget things really easily, so I have to write crap down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, because as often as I'll look back on ideas and be like, that was dumb. I should change this because I'm a different me than I was 8 months ago. I also look back on things I've written down and be like, ooh, good thing I wrote that down. That's an important thing I needed.
Yeah, yep.
It's better to have everything than it is to have nothing. Alrighty. We also asked you guys for your thoughts again this week, and you guys paid us in spades.
Yes. So the first thoughts from @DemonDiceCal. Where do you guys stand on the very strict textbook format of beginning, middle, end in webcomics? I feel like sometimes people run into problems with pacing because life gets in the way or update frequency, and an intro might end up being short, the middle rather lengthy, and the end even lengthier, as it's hard to lose track of your pacing over several years and hiatuses. In this regard, wouldn't it be keeping a semi-strict timeline be helpful? Because I know that some creators feel like having a strict timeline is boring or keeps them from wanting to work on the story. That's kind of why my script is very much, it's going to take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
As long as it's going to take as long as it needs to get there.
As far as like beginning, middle, and end, that depends. Like Amber, your comic starts pretty in media res. Like,
yeah,
your main character's on the run. We don't know why. She's seeking like safety with a group we don't know. Jeff, yours also kind of starts this way. Like, we don't know Ravi yet. We're rushed into like Ravi's kind of introduction. We're getting through these bandits talking about her reputation and stuff. I think my comic actually suffers from this because it was my first, baby's first webcomic, and I definitely feel like I front-loaded way too much exposition at the beginning of it, and I feel like it took like a while for me to probably get my legs story-wise. Although keeping a timeline is also good. I have a story that starts like, in media res, it starts in the middle of all these characters' respective arcs, but I do still have a lot of that is also told through flashbacks, so I do have a timeline that has all the events chronologically, just for my benefit.
And I mean, with my comic right now, like I do have the beginning, the middle, the end. We're still in the beginning of my comic. I don't have like a prologue or like an introduction, like this beginning part. It's like the first 4 chapters are the beginning, and it's the setup, meeting the characters, getting the plot underway, and then like the middle is doing the plot and doing this huge thing that is the point of the comic, and then the end is going to be the conclusion, of course, but like the middle is gonna be really long.
Yep.
And I don't know, I never really thought about it in like, what if my beginning, middle, and end aren't like definitive enough, but like I don't think that really matters, like as long as you know where you're at, like, and as long as the story kind of like flows nicely, it doesn't really matter how long you take in each part.
Yeah.
See, I worried about that for a long time too, and that's actually why I kind of jumped the story ahead a bit. And that's why you have that prologue and then you have chapter 1, because if we're talking about like OG firearm script here, it was going to take a lot longer to get to that point. A lot longer. I think it depends. I think in this case it depends also like on maybe the themes you have for your story and kind of considering like what's important to tell and what's not important. I don't know. I think I'm okay with like having short beginnings and then like lengthy middles. I don't know about lengthier ends.
I mean, the middles are that's gonna probably be the biggest point of your story, like, is
Yeah.
Yeah.
that middle
Like the
bit, and
meat.
that's okay for it to be the meaty part of it, you know?
Yeah. I guess if you want a semi-strict timeline, then yeah, if that works for you, go for it. Do what works for you. But if you don't want to do a timeline, then I don't see why you don't have to.
Yeah, and the whole, like, all the bits about, like, the pacing getting weird because of, like, update frequency and, like, having to take hiatuses and stuff. I mean, yeah, but also if you have it kind of figured out, like, it doesn't really matter how long it takes you to get it out, because once it's all done, like, there it is. The pacing's fine because you had it figured out. It just took a little longer. Like, maybe the beginning took a long time to get out because you were in school or something. Okay, that's fine. You can still, like, you can read it in the quick amount of time you're supposed to once it's all done. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
And I mean, life gets in the way. Don't let that stop you.
It just happens.
Can always just come back to it, or if there's like not that much out, you can always like redo it when you're in a more stable place.
From at @scribble_death. Some quick tips I think can help people. Have a few people overlook your script for any odd sounding phrases or other errors. The more eyes, the better. Yeah, we kind of covered that. If something seems odd, sleep on it. That's some good advice. Obviously, it's best to write the script first and then draw stuff. Also put speech bubbles in your comic thumbs.
Yes.
All right, guys, I get it. if you're stuck, write part of another scene or script. Yeah, that's what I do. I bounce between my stories all the time. Oh, and they also suggest, I recommend going check out their tweet in this the thread for our questions. There's this great tool for writing scripts that's called writerduet.com. I haven't personally checked it out yet, but
Me neither. Yeah.
I'm always down for better ways of writing scripts. I'm just set in my ways and do not want to leave Google for anything right now.
Yeah, same pretty much. I'm just like, I Google Docs. Google Docs is fine. Once that becomes harder to parse, I might like switch to Microsoft Word, frankly.
Yes, those are some good tips.
It's all good advice.
Yeah. And finally, from @JugumPuppet, I'm pretty sure I've been doing this wrong, but hey, here's my take. I blame OCTs, but having a bare minimum of a loose outline when it comes to creating the character's role in said story, well, that feels... What I usually do is world build to an extent almost unnecessary, but it allows me the freedom, almost like a video game, of placing my characters into these worlds and having them tell the story. That's my scripting, and it's a bizarre way to go about it, but me in my lone case, it's the only way I've been able to create smooth transitions and good pacing. It's not the smartest way to go about creating a script, but again, I usually struggle with the characters, but provide that missing element via world building. And I mean, intense unnecessary world building, think Dark Souls, I go way over what's needed, but world building is for another episode. That's true, I think we could do a whole episode on world building. It depends on what you enjoy working on, and a way to work around such. Most people like characters, so the script is easier to write, but for oddballs like moi, literally farting into the wind is the best way I've been able to figure out a plan. In short, storyboarding while you go. Sorry for the long reply.
That's a really interesting way to do it. My world building usually comes after I have the characters and the problems.
Yeah, and my stories that have like more concrete world building are way harder to write a narrative for. My few stories where it's like, for some godforsaken reason, the world came to me first instead of the characters, and their like plot lines is like, now what do I do? How do I make this a story? But I mean, if that works for you.
Yeah.
I definitely do the opposite, because I feel like for me it's easier to world build as you go, because then you can kind of focus more on what is important, and then if there just happens to be a moment for why you can stick maybe some world building in this spot or here and there, then it's a little bit more naturally flowing. I'm very envious of people who have actually worked out their entire world first, because it's like, dang, you actually know what's going to happen here. I'm just like, well, here's this small little corner of the world.
I'm a big proponent of like you only show what you need to in regards to world building. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There are definitely some stories out there where it's like the world building is super cool, but it's like I only got like halfway through the comic because like this story was a lot like pretty lackluster in comparison. And then there's other comics where it's like I don't know if I could tell you the name of the city it takes place in, but it's a story that like has grabbed me, and it's a story I want to keep up with. Yeah, you don't like. I think setting is only as necessary as you want it to be. You don't have to. It's like as we said before. You don't have to put everything in it. But again, if world building first, character second works for you, by all means. It's just really what works for you, I think, is the big message.
That's the tagline for this one. It's what worked for you.
I mean, that applies to comics in general, doesn't it?
It applies to
Whatever
pretty much
works for
any
you.
sort of like creative endeavor entirely. Does it work for you? Yeah. And then the second bigger asterisk is like, do people like it? And then the third is like, will they pay for it? And that's kind of like the 3 steps of any creative endeavor. Does it work for me? And also, is it marketable and viable? Which is a whole fucking other conversation.
Yeah, let's not touch that one just yet.
But yeah, that's all we got for this week. Amber, what do you have for our webcomic recommendation of the week?
This week, I'm recommending the webcomic Monster Pulp by Magnolia. You should follow her on Twitter. And I don't know, have either of you read Monster Pulse?
I have not.
Mm-mm.
This is one that I will like consistently recommend to people because it's just Magnolia does such a good job with the like writing, and it's just really good. So the comic is, I'm just gonna read the like new to the comic summary, if that's okay.
Yeah, no,
Because I
sure.
think it
This is
sells
one
it
that's been
better than I
like
could.
on my list for like a while, but like I haven't been in a super binge ready mood lately, so it's like back
It's
burner.
got a lot. It's got a lot, and it's really good. Okay, so Monster Pulse. It's about a small town somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. It's home to strange monsters that are born from the body parts of human beings. The body monsters continue to function as the original part did, even when they're far apart from the human. So everything is fine and dandy unless the monster is hurt or killed. So, for example, the main character, her body monster is her heart. So she has like a big monster that literally is her heart that like can fight with her and stuff. It's really cool.
That sounds dangerous.
It is dangerous, but it's awesome. These monsters were created by a sinister shadow organization called Shell. Their reasons for this are unknown even to most of their employees. They're not exactly 100% evil, that gray morality, but their experiments and secrecy are more important to them than the lives and safety of people and monsters. So the plot is that 4 brave kids, along with their monsters, struggle to keep themselves hidden from the public and safe from Shell. Along the way, they vow to help protect anyone who has a body monster and to discover why and how the monsters were created. It's really good. It's a really cool comic. All of the main characters are like, young kids, but like they're really endearing, and like they all have like really cool character arcs, and it's really good. It's a really good comic.
Okay.
All
Right, you're
right.
selling me on this one.
Okay.
The writing is consistently like incredible. I like remember there's like a specific point in like the early bits of the comic, like before it was full color, where like I was reading this and I was like, all right, this is kind of stressful, and then like there's just a moment, and I won't tell you what it is, but there's a moment where I was like, this is the most intense comic I've read in a long time. It gets the main characters are kids, but like it's heavy.
It goes places.
It goes places. It's really good. I recommend it 100%. Please check out Monster Pulse.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Read Monster Pulse, you guys. All right. I think that's gonna do it for us this week. As always, thank you for sending in your responses to our tweets and stuff. It's nice to see people like responding, and your questions kind of help move the episodes along. And
definitely help move them out.
Yeah, I hope we're providing helpful advice. I like to think we are. Anything else, you guys?
I like your shirt you're wearing today. I just want you to know that.
If you're wearing a shirt.
I didn't think about that.
Jeff likes your Schrodinger shirt that you're wearing today. Until next time, I've been Brent.
I've been Amber.
And I've been Jeff.
And we do this for free. Jeff, who's playing us off this week?
Oh,
I am.
Plot twist.
Shit. The old episode 7 heel turn.
I should have seen this one coming.